Welcome, Wakesburg Christian Church. I'm Pastor Matt. I know the background looks a little different right now, which it was so amazing that with technology nowadays we can have church from anywhere. And so my wife and I were blessed to be able to be a part of the wedding of Emily Adams and Johnny Handel. And so we're in Idaho right now, but we love that you're able to watch from different homes. There's people exercising right now that have told me, hey, I watch you while I exercise, I'm watching in the car. We just want to welcome all of you to Wakesburg Christian Church. Before we begin on this Father's Day, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening with church reopening in this time of COVID-19. I know that now that we are 3 months in to this pandemic and the stay-at-home order and church being outside of the building, there's a lot of people that are itching to get back, myself included. And my promise to you before was that I would faithfully pray about when the right time would be to reopen our church. My wife and I and many leaders of the church, board members, have prayed heavy about saying, hey, when is the right time? And there's times in my life, and I'm sure in yours, where I wish God would give me like this bright neon sign saying, here's the date that you're going to reopen. But we have, as we look at the mandates from the governor of the state of Washington and those that are in charge and professionals in the area of healthcare and this infectious disease, we kept praying about different dates. I had next Sunday that I was thinking, hey, can we have an outdoor service? And I realized that once I said, hey, maybe next Sunday could happen, I didn't sleep well. It didn't sit right with me. So I presented another date. I was like, okay, July 5th, maybe we can have an outdoor service. But all of those dates didn't sit well with us as leadership of the church. It wasn't just me as the pastor of the church making the decisions. It was the elders coming together. It was the board members coming together, the leaders of the church praying, saying, God, when do you want this church to reopen? And the word that we got was not yet. And I know that's not going to sit right with some of you. And we love you and we understand the need to want to get back. But we have decided to not even entertain a date until at least phase 3 of this stay-at-home order. And even then, if you say, okay, we hit stage or phase 3, we're going to reopen Sunday, that's not going to happen. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the entire picture. We have beds filling up in Tri-Cities right now, which is close to Waitsburg if you're watching from a different area. We have Yakima County where the hospitals are full of COVID-19, and in Walla Walla the cases are rising. And we made a commitment that the only thing that we want to spread at Waitsburg Christian Church is love. We don't want to spread anything else. We understand the disappointment as you see churches reopening and having services, even churches in our own community and surrounding communities reopening. Now, this decision that we've made as a church has nothing to do with what we feel about other churches. I firmly believe that the pastors of the other churches in our community and surrounding communities have been called by God. And they are amazing men and women of God, and they're doing what they feel best for their church. But as for me, as Pastor Matt of the Waitsburg Christian Church, I have been called to only lead this church, not any of the other churches. But we also won't be moved by the pressure of man. We won't be moved by the pressure of governing officials. We're going to feel and we're going to pray and we're going to decide what is right based on what God is telling us and God alone. So I wish I could tell you, I know I said there was an announcement. That is the announcement that we're going to hold off on opening up our churches. And then when we do go into phase 3 and we decide, hey, let's have an outdoor service. That's our goal, is to be able to have outdoor services until our building is equipped to be able to hold whatever's going on, but then we can wait and see, with the groups of people that are getting together, the protesters, even riots that are happening, what's it going to look like in a couple weeks? And I don't ever want to open the doors for a moment only to have to shut them again. So we just feel God is saying, hey, we're united at this time. The church board is unanimous in this. We had a special meeting this week, and we just said, listen, God is saying it's not time yet. So for Waitsburg Christian Church, I ask that you continue to pray, continue to ask God, when is this going to happen? Or switch that praying to, God, heal this country, heal this world from this virus. The people that are sick, the people that are dying, that's our focus here. But God has called us to not relationally distance. We've been called to social distance in order to love our neighbor as God has called us to do. But that doesn't mean you need to distance relationally. Maybe get together with 3 or 4 people in your community and hold church together in your home as you watch the sermons coming forward. Whatever it is, get on a massive Zoom call. We have so many options for you to do. So we're asking, pray for our church, pray for our country, pray for our world, be safe out there. God will let us know the time. But for now, Waitsburg Christian Church, we're going to continue to have church, but it's going to be online, and we will keep you updated as soon as that happens. So that is the message. I'm glad that we're able to get that out to let you know. I know that there's going to be disappointment. I know this, but just please understand that the leadership of this church had prayed faithfully on this, and this is the decision that we have made collectively as a whole. So today's Father's Day. We'll go from that and transition into Father's Day. I want to say Happy Father's Day to all the amazing fathers out there, and even the moms, the women out there who are now acting as a father if it looks a little different in your home. But as I was praying about this message, and I'm saying, God, where do you want this message? What message do you want to give to the fathers? I realized that what God has given me is a roadmap of the best gift that you can give to your children. Fathers, this is the greatest gift that you can give to your children. This is a gift that I've been blessed to be able to give to my daughter. It didn't happen easily, and it took a while for me to get my head right and follow the steps of Jesus. My wife's nodding enthusiastically. That's awesome. But I want to pray. Let's invite God into this space. God, we love you. Lord, we know that there is sometimes disappointment in the direction that you have called us to walk. But I ask that turns to just praise for you, Lord, that we're able to follow you. We're able to go by the steps that you want, that we're not moved by anyone else except for you. Lord, I pray on this Father's Day that you touch the hearts of the Father in a way that has never been done before. Lord, not by my words, but by yours. That we can raise up a generation of children that are Jesus followers. Lord, I pray that as this message gets to many, many, many homes, cars, wherever people are watching, from their office, from work, that this message just pierces their heart and pierces their soul. In your name we pray. Amen. So a lot of you have grown up in church. I grew up in church, and what we realize and what we've been taught and what pastors have preached is that becoming a Christian is easy, right? Where Christ died, he rose again, the price has been paid, where all we have to do is accept that. That's the greatest thing. God is saying, you don't have to do anything to become a Christian. You just accept it. It's been paid. That's it to become a Christian. Becoming a Christian is easy, but when you open the pages of the Bible and you read the pages and the writings from the Apostle Paul, I realized that you don't read anything about someone becoming a Christian. In fact, the first century Christians didn't even call themselves Christians. non-Christians called them that. It was this derogatory term for those people. It was this derogatory term meaning one who is associated with Christ. That is their way of life. They're walking with Jesus. You know, only 3 times in the Bible, Christian is mentioned. In the first, it was Luke documented this first transaction of the church, the believers, those who followed Christ as Christians. The first time it appeared was in Acts, where Paul says the disciples were named Christians in Antioch. So you have this this story of how it originated, but you have the story of what it meant. Disciple. The disciples were called Christians at Antioch. I asked myself, who are the disciples? It was this broader group of people. Luke wasn't talking about the 12 disciples, 12 apostles that followed Jesus. It was this broader group. Disciple always referred to as Jesus followers, where they publicly associated with Jesus during his life and after his resurrection, when the church just exploded. And the disciples, that's what they were known as. But the first century followers were thought to be a part of like this cult, this sect. And they were actually called the Nazarene sect because they followed a man from Nazarene. And the citizens of Antioch were pressed to come up with a name. They couldn't use the term disciples because many other beliefs, rabbis, teachers, all of that, they used this term disciples. So they came up with the term Christians, one who follows Christ, Christians. This is challenging for us. This is challenging for me. This is challenging for you. We may be comfortable claiming the badge of Christian. That may be comfortable to us, where we hear it all the time. Yeah, I'm a Christian. But here's the question. It's easy to say, I'm a Christian. But are we Jesus followers? Are we following the example? Are we following Jesus? Or are we simply believing in Jesus? Are we following his example? Or are we content with becoming a good example? I'm good enough. This is a good example. And the hard thing is I can define and redefine the term Christian until I'm good. You can define and redefine the term Christian until you're good. We all can define and redefine the term Christian until we're all good, until we're all fine, until we all feel fine. And the reason is because the Bible never clearly defines what a Christian is. If you look at that term Christian, the Bible never clearly defines what a Christian is. But Jesus follower, that really doesn't need a definition, does it? Becoming a Christian is easy. It won't cost us anything. But Jesus follower, it'll always cost us something. And it costs some people more than others, doesn't it? But here's what history has shown. The ones that it costs the most have made the biggest difference in this world, have made the most difference. Where Jesus came to introduce the kingdom of God to earth. So to follow Jesus then and now means what? To walk in a different direction. So sometimes against culture. We'd be countercultural, not moving with a crowd. This was the case in the first century. And Jesus made it clear in his most famous, most quoted, and maybe, sadly, least applied sermon. It was the Sermon on the Mount. So if you go with me to Matthew 5, where it starts for a while there, Matthew 5, of going through this, where it says, beginning in Matthew 5, now when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. They have no idea how lucky they are. This crowd of people where Jesus is up on the mountain, they have no idea how lucky they are, do they? Where this is the Sermon on the Mount. I've been blessed to go to many Mariners games with my dad. Happy Father's Day to my father, one of the best ever, the best ever in my life. But he used to take us to Mariners games every year. And we've been to some incredible Mariners games where Cal Ripken Jr. steps up and hits a grand slam to put them ahead. And then Ken Griffey Jr. comes up the next inning and hits a home run. And then they end up winning the game and everyone's cheering and we're hugging strangers. I've been blessed to have the opportunity to see Garth Brooks in concert. And it was the first time when he came out of retirement and first time he came to California, and I took my wife, and I hate country. I do. Don't judge me. I won't judge you for liking country. But he put on the greatest concert that I've ever seen. Just his passion and enthusiasm, and we're still hugging strangers. But they're at the Sermon on the Mount. They participated in an event that they didn't know at the time, but it would shape Western civilization, reshape cultural values, the norms that were going on. It would turn it all. The love your enemies. Even if you've been given a little, give a lot. Turn the other cheek. Forgiveness. If you come to the altar and you want forgiveness for your sin, and you realize that I have something against my dad, I have something against my mom, my sister, my brother, I have something against my friend. He's saying leave it at the altar, because God can't accept that if you're holding something against. Leave it at the altar. Go and make it right, and then come back to the altar. If you see the speck in your brother's eye, why don't you clean out your own eye? You got that log in your eye. Why are you doing this? Blessed are those that curse you. It was epic, where he turned the entire value system upside down at the time. Everything that they had known, he turned it completely upside down. And he drops the mic and he heads to Capernaum. And then at the end of this, so it takes almost 3 chapters to get through this just amazing epic sermon. And it gets to the end in Matthew, the end of Matthew. It says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds, listen to this, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. There was something different about this Jesus. Maybe he was the Messiah. This is what they're thinking. And then it goes on into 8 where it says, when he came down from the mountainside, the large crowds followed him. So they can't get enough. They want him. They're going after him. And a man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus, he had just preached all of these different things, right? He's turning the world upside down, and he reaches out, and it says, he reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. And the crowd goes wild. He's walking the walk. He's not just talking and then not following it up with actions. That is an important statement. I want you to remember that. He is walking the walk. Then the mood changes. And it's lost on us. Where Matthew, as he's writing this, he doesn't need to elaborate, because the people there don't need elaboration on what just happened. They felt it. You know, it was like a story I had before I met my wife. Side note. When I was dating a girl, and we were in her basement, lights off, all we were doing was watching a movie. But we were sitting close to each other. That's all we were doing, I promise you. But then all of a sudden the lights come on and her dad comes down. And I'm telling this story to my friends, and they don't ask, how did you feel at that moment? Because they understood, okay, anybody who is in that position knows what you're going to feel in that moment. It was, what happened next? And this is one of those moments in the life of Jesus. Matthew didn't need to tell us how everyone felt. Everyone knew. But here's what happened. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Pause right there. There's so many times that you can scroll through the message of Jesus and miss different wording, because we weren't there at that time. We don't understand. We don't feel. We don't get the historical context, because we don't feel the gravity. This is beyond awkward. Jesus had just said, love your enemies, do unto others, turn the other cheek. Great Facebook post, right? It's a great picture to put up on Pinterest or Instagram, but this is totally different. This is a whole nother level. Where if you look at 100 years before this, 100 years where you have General Roman Pompey, where he enters the city of Jerusalem, and he barges into the temple, pushes aside the priest, enters the holies of holies, and that the only place that the only people that could go in there were priests, those who were close to God. This was the ultimate place for those who follow God, the true God, the one true God. And he's curious about this Jewish God, where he claims that he is the only God. And he goes right by, he desecrates the temple, goes right in there. And this was huge to the people at those times. Goes right in, pulls aside this huge curtain, walks in, and he looks around, and he's so disappointed because there's no God. There's no idol. And he's thinking they build this extraordinary structure for a God that has no physical structure. There's no idol. What good is a God that you can't see? And he left. But here's the thing. He didn't leave alone. He took thousands of Jewish people as slaves with him. And the Galileans and Judeans, they lost their independence that day. They were forced to pay taxes to the Roman kingdom. And years later, there's another general shows up, where he goes through the same thing. He steals all the Jewish wealth. He takes all the temple taxes. Then you have 40 BC, before Christ, where Herod the Great, where he was called King of the Jews, even though by the Roman Senate, even though he wasn't Jewish. The reason he was called King of the Jews is because he ruled and reigned over the Jewish people. His son actually executed a man that you may know as John the Baptist. And when Jesus was in his 20s, the same Roman kingdom commissioned Pontius Pilate, who introduced crucifixion as a main death sentence for Jews. He was constantly offending Jews on purpose. He was actually recalled. This is staggering because of the carnage that the Roman people inflicted on the Jewish people at those times. He was actually recalled because he was too harsh with the Jewish people, where he later went off and committed suicide. But the point is, anything associated with Rome was tainted at that time. There's too much history. And then it gets worse, where this wasn't a common soldier. This centurion that when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. This was a centurion asking the Jewish people for help. This was a man who earned his rank by violence, who obeyed without questions, without conscience, where he flogged even his own men and executed his own people. This was a man who was likely recruited from around the land, those communities around the Jewish faith, the Jewish villages, where they all looked at Jews as a detestable race, where they refused to join the rest of the world. They considered them racist, where Jews looked at others as unclean. You know the story of the woman at the well, where she's shocked and she looks at Jesus and she says, I can't believe a Jew would even speak to me. This was the relationship. Peter even admitted that he had never stepped foot inside a Gentile house. No, it's no wonder they considered them odd and strange. This was the context, church. This was the emotion. This was the disgust that hung in the air outside of Capernaum. And as a centurion stops and asks Jesus for help, and they must have been thinking, this centurion is now asking Jesus for help. This centurion represented everything that Jesus had the right to hate. Where this centurion had blood on his hands. Not just any blood, Jewish blood on his hands. And now he needs a favor. Have you been there, church? We all have. Oh, Oh, you want to stay with me again? Last time a couple days turned into months, and you didn't help with any of the bills, and you left in a hurry, and you left horribly. Oh, you want a job recommendation? All those things that you were saying behind my back, it came back to me. Now you want a job recommendation? Oh, you want to come to our house for Christmas? Do you remember what happened last holiday or the holiday before that? You want to borrow money again? You want a second chance. This is like your fifth second chance. There's too much history here. This is what we have in common, church. What I have in common with everyone else in the world. If you want me to help a stranger that has done nothing against me or has hurt me in any way, I'm all for that, right? You're all for that. Oh, you want to help that homeless man on the street. You want to reach out to this person. That feels good. But doing good for someone that I hate, doing good for someone that doesn't love me or doesn't love me back, that's too much. Becoming a Christian is easy. Salvation is free. It'll cost you nothing. Following Jesus, moving beyond what's reasonable, that's difficult. That's way beyond natural. But that's Jesus's point. He's saying if you do good to someone, in the writings of the Sermon on the Mount, he said, if you do good for someone who is good to you, what credit is that? Even sinners do this. Only do good for those who do good for you? That's easy. But it'll keep us behind closed doors. It'll keep us with our group. It'll keep us with our tribe and no one else. And you're thinking, what would Jesus do in this moment where the centurion comes to him? And once we read the end of the story, you and I have a decision to make. We have to decide. Are we willing to follow Jesus, or are we content with just being called a Christian? Matthew 8:6, it goes on, what would he do? Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering. This word suffering, the crowd must have laughed at this centurion. Wait, you're finally concerned with someone suffering. You personify all suffering. We've suffered our entire life because of what you have done to our people, what you have done for us. And now you and your nation, you want us to end your suffering? You have never done that for us. You have never stopped the suffering for us. Jesus could have got personal. If you think about it, Jesus could have got personal. He's saying, because of your nation, my mother had to give birth in a stable, which makes for good stories at church now, right? And good nativity scenes and all that. But at that time, incredibly, incredibly dangerous. But if Jesus grants this request, this could be dangerous for Jesus. He could lose the crowd. He could lose all those people. He could lose that excitement. If rumors of this spread, it could be the end of his mission. But I love Jesus. And he came to introduce this new morality and ethic, a new way to see the world, and not only a new way to see the world, but everyone in the world. And to keep with his teachings, he chose to do something good for someone who had caused great damage for his people, great pain and suffering, never anything good. This was even a group of people that oversaw the death of him. The crucifixion was put on. They had centurions in the crowd crucifying Jesus. What would be Jesus' response to this? And Jesus said to him, okay, I will go and heal him. Those in the crowd must have been thinking, this is a bridge way too far. Jesus, you can't do this. I know that you just preached all these amazing things, but this has gone too far. And the centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. and that one come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was astonished and said to those following him, I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then Jesus said to the centurion, listen to this, go. It will be done just as you believed it would. And the servant was healed. And then I think he pauses. He looks at the crowd. He must have smiled because their jaws must have been all the way to the floor. And he heads to Peter's house, which I love, to get some lunch, to eat. And the crowd stunned. He's matching his words with his deeds. He wasn't kidding about everything in those 3 chapters of saying, this is who I am. He actually expects us to literally do good to those who won't do good for us. Those who don't live like us. In church nowadays, those who don't look like us. Those who don't like us. It's no wonder that we reduce our faith to a label, right? I'm a Christian. I take notes. I feel bad when I harm others. Sometimes I retreat within myself because it's easier to be a Christian than it is a Jesus follower. It's easier to do good for a stranger that didn't offend me than it is someone who offends me constantly. It's easier to do good for those who look like me, who live like me, who act like me. It's easier to be a Christian than a Jesus follower. And if that's what you choose, if that's what we choose, we will continue to contribute to the challenges this nation is facing today. And I'll tell you why. Because if you don't choose to follow Jesus, you will be content to simply believe. Or you'll believe all the right things. You'll believe that all men and women are created in the image of God, that all men and women are created equal. You'll believe in the C.S. Lewis, where there are no ordinary people. There are no mere mortals. You'll believe that they are all valuable and assigned by God. But if you haven't decided to follow Jesus, it ends right there. It ends with correct belief. Because if we don't follow Jesus, we won't act. We won't act on a belief when it costs us something. And we won't. Here's the tricky thing. We won't react. We won't react when we see people treated poorly and unjust. But apparently Jesus saw this coming, didn't he? Jesus apparently saw Matt coming. He saw you coming. He anticipated a generation content to know, but not to do. So interesting. Jesus reserved his final words, his harshest statement, for those content with believing, but not doing. Content with sitting on the sidelines, not willing to risk anything. Content with not willing to act or react. Here is the closing statements of the most famous sermon in Matthew 7:26. It says, but everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice, is like a foolish man. He's saying that everyone who has heard this sermon and was moved and maybe even agreed with all or most parts of it, but when it gets down to real life and emotional moments, those who don't put to action, you're a fool. And I'm a fool. And they have fooled themselves into what? Into believing that we are better than what we truly are. That we have found favor with God that we don't really have. And it said, it's like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. Here's what I want to leave with you, church. The men and women, but today especially the fathers, who make a difference in this world, are not just the ones that believe right. They are the men, the fathers, who act and react when something isn't right, when it costs them something. But here's my invitation to you, to us, to me. Let's not be content with Christian. Let's follow. Let's continue to do good for those who can't and won't do good for us. And then when the centurions in our world show up, because they will show up, and we recoil almost at sacrificing our time, our resources, our forgiveness, our reputation for them, let's remember this. This is the why behind the what. Why Jesus said and expects us to follow through. Not just to be defined as a Christian, but to follow him, the epicenter of our faith. Remember this when confronted with the Roman centurions in your life, by the centurions in our world. It's saying in Romans 5:8, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still centurions, Christ died for us. Then I believe he rose from the dead. And from the pages of the New Testament, I believe that he's glancing at you, he's looking at you, and he's glancing over the shoulder at us and saying, follow me. This brand of love that has the potential to change the world. But here's the funny thing. Jesus never invited anyone to be a Christian. Jesus invited us to follow him. Fathers, my charge to you, follow him. That is the greatest gift that you can give your children. Not just to say, hey, my dad's a Christian, but for them to say, my dad is a follower of Jesus, who when things get tough and it costs him something, he stands by what Christ has called him to do. He's not just defined as a label. Because fathers, your kids will continue to watch you, and they are following you wherever you go. And let that path be following Jesus, not just Christian. Happy Father's Day. Let's pray. Father, thank you. We get to call you Father on Father's Day. I'm blown away by that statement. That you are Abba, Father, everything, the great I am. And we are your kids. Let's not just dumb that down to a label, but to followers of Jesus. Or when things get tough, I don't want to use that label to get out of things, to kind of stand back on the sidelines and not act or react to the things that are happening in this world today. When I have a daughter who's watching everything that I do, even from afar, she's watching everything, every step. And as she grows up into this next generation, let us raise Jesus followers, not Christians. Lord, Jesus followers, Christians, those who follow you. And I pray if there's anyone watching that has not yet committed themselves to that today is the day where becoming a Christian is easy. It doesn't cost us, where we just cry out to God and we say in our hearts, Father, I believe in you. I believe that you rose again, that you died for us. You lived this sinless life and died for us. But yet you rose again. Lord, let us turn from our way of living and walk towards you. Let us not be content with just being called a Christian. That belief isn't enough. It's to act and react to the things that are going. Let us be those Jesus followers that our kids can emulate, our kids can follow. Because our kids will not listen to our words